I'm joined now by Eizu Uwaoma, who is founder and managing director of Xavier Consulting, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Eizu, good morning to you.
Morning.
You know, guest of the house, so always great to have you here on the show.
Yeah.
So let's begin with Japan. You know, we've got quite a few topics to move through. So let's begin with Japan ramping up efforts to revive its chip industry. What should we know about this?
When we think of Japan, we think of sushi, Naruto, the kimono women dress, but we forget that in the 80s and the 90s, you had what you call the Japanese invasion of the American brand industry, especially around building great brands, Toyota, to the likes of Motorola, to the likes of Nintendo, and of course, Honda. That golden age seems to be coming back again, right? So it's good to see them do that. It's just that they're 10 years late, in my own opinion, right? Because you already have the likes of Taiwan and China already leading that. But it's to be late is better than never. And the challenge they're going to face, first of all, would be the demography of their generations. Like typically, if you think of the Japanese people, you know that they're struggling right now with having a younger age demography, right? So there's a lot of upskilling that has to happen. Good thing is that the government's putting their money where their mouth is, especially around over 60 billion subsidy to make sure that that industry grows. And we hope that that happens pretty well. For America, I think it's good news because it's a case of choosing your enemy, right? I think Japan is a better competitor to them than China would be when you talk about semiconductors and anything else, because I mean, in the end, Japanese understands operational excellence and efficiency more than anybody else. They gave the world Kaizen, they gave us Muda Murimura, which has great management concept. So I think the only advantage that Japan would use to beat the bigger players right now would be, first of all, to put their brand also in the line. I see what Intel did in the 80s and the 90s when they bargained for them to have Intel inside on every laptop, even though it's a semiconductor or an internal component. So yeah, great news for Japan. We're hoping to see that golden age of Japanese technology taking over the world once again, like they did in the 80s and 90s.
Do you reckon it's going to be an uphill climb, though?
Yes, absolutely will, but it's very doable because they're very resilient. Culture is powerful, and Japanese culture is known to be very efficient, and I think that's a great advantage, and of course, operationally excellent as well. So I hope that they will use that as an advantage.
Undoubtedly, the work ethic is there. We can't deny them that. Well, let's look next at MultiChoice Nigeria losing 243,000 subscribers in 6 months. What does this tell us about current consumer behavior in relation to economic downturn?
Honestly, I think it might just be lazy for them to think of 243,000 customer losses to economics and to the economy. I don't think that's the case, right? I think it's a case of competition, and not competition from what they are used to, right? Competition is not the guy doing the same thing as you. Competition is where the customer would have bought if he didn't buy from you. And the truth about it is the biggest competition right now to proper traditional TV will be your phone. The average human being touches his phone 400 times in a day. And of course, what that means practically is that a lot of people are moving from mainstream TV to consuming data and information, entertainment, especially on demand through streaming platforms. I feel sad, but if you lose 243,000 customers in 1 year, over 18% more than they lost last year, it seems like we're back to having another Kodak moment. You know, Kodak losing its prime in the early, the late 20th century. So that's the sad news about it. I don't think that is because of the economy. I think it's because that consumer behavior is changing to the internet and changing to phones. I see what they're also trying to do, trying to invent themselves. We're trying to maybe invest in Showmax and all that type of stuff. But it's really sad in itself. Sometimes, I mean, you call it, you move on, right? Disruption is something that always happens. Change will come. You either accept it or get consumed by it. And that's really practically, in my own opinion, what's happening. I mean, we've passed the golden age of MultiChoice. That's the reality about it.
Times are changing. Is there a silver lining that apart from, you know, I mean, like you mentioned, you referenced Showmax is there. So they're already beginning to think smartly and leapfrogging in that regard. But beyond that, is there any other way of clawing back those viewers?
Honestly, I don't think so, because don't forget that they almost ran a monopolistic market for a very long time, even though they were not the lead players. That era is gone, literally. And then if you look at culture as well, I mean, if it was a Nigerian company, we can think deeply more about it. But you know the South African Nigerian history, right? So those are fundamental real issues. But I mean, they had a great blast. They had a blast. I mean, when they were in their prime, they were pretty good. I mean, shout out to MultiChoice, shout out to DSTV, but more importantly, when change happens, you either accept it or you get consumed by it.
All right, guys. It sounds like you're saying your goodbyes there. Well, let's look next at Bolt's annual revenue hitting 2 billion euros and expanding to over 50 countries. I mean, okay, let's hear from you.
Bolt, poster boy for competition. When we think of Bolt in Nigeria, you might just be stuck in sort of like a paradox, literally, because in reality, Bolt is not as big as people think when you compare them with Uber. But when you're in Nigeria, you think so, because I mean, if you're in America, Bolt is not as big as it is. But Bolt has done pretty well. 2 billion in revenue is a lot. I mean, 50 countries, that's what they are in now. Right, but if you look at 50 countries compared to, say, an Uber that has 70-something countries, that's not how you grade it. I rather grade it in cities, because when you talk about cities, you now know that Uber has at least 8 times more cities. But I see also what Bolt is trying to do. They're diversifying beyond just trying to be a cab hailing service. They're going into other things like rentals of electric bikes and all that type of stuff. And of course, delivery. I think the future of Africa and emerging continent will not even be mobility, it will be in logistics. And I see how they're going head-to-head with the likes of Chowdeck and Glovo. So good news for them. I like the fact that they're doing like a blue ocean strategy, taking on contested markets, especially frontier and emerging markets. So well done to both. They've done pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly strengthens the company's position as a top European competitor. But if you spoke about trends just now, if we look at trends like self-driving vehicles, in what ways do you, what's the scope for that to get nicely incorporated?
Around that, because the idea of driver on demand is in its this is the late stage of it. That's why I mentioned that they're one step ahead, so they're diversifying. You're not just looking at Bolt, or they're not also looking at themselves as a driver on demand brand. More importantly, I think what they're doing now is trying to diversify to other things, like food delivery will always happen. I mean, that's fundamental. And of course, the fact that they're becoming big players in the whole electric motor, not electric motor, the electric car business. Yeah, so I think it's the electric vehicle space. I think that's pretty important in itself. I like their model. I think it's powerful in itself, and I know, considering that they are the mid-late entry into that industry, I think they're doing pretty well. They came almost 5 years after Uber, and they're giving Uber a good run for their money, especially the places that Uber wouldn't want to go to. Even in Nigeria, if you go to like the interior part of, say, Nigeria, you find a Bolt before you find an Uber, and I think that's really powerful in itself.
All right, so never underestimate the underdog here. Absolutely. I mean, and great step in the right direction there for Bolt. Well, let's move on to financial services now. We have Access Holdings PLC acquiring a majority stake in Fraser. I mean, that's Access Holdings has really been going quite aggressively, we have to say.
That's huge. I like to say that if you're write the kind of books you want to read. I like the fact that the founders still have their founders' culture of extreme ambition, right? If you think about why Mauritius, right, or any place across the Indian Ocean, you know that they're trying to cement their brand, their newfound brand identity as being a global bank and not just an African or even a West African bank. And I think that that's powerful in itself. But because when you look at it, there's no logic to that country. I mean, the population of the country is literally half the size of Bayelsa. And the reason why I'm using Bayelsa in particular is that Bayelsa is the smallest state in Nigeria, right? So it gives you an idea of how they're thinking, empire state of mind, takeover. And of course, if you look at Mauritius and look at the dynamics of their country, you know that they're very strategic. They're financial hubs within that Indian Atlantic Ocean area in the map. So I think that's powerful. That's them making a statement to entry into non-core African territories, and that's really powerful in itself. Finally, we can start thinking of Nigerian brands that have totally made in Nigeria to the world, and not just Nigeria to Nigeria. And I think that that's really important.
Absolutely. Very refreshing news. Unfortunately, Eizu, we've run out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us. As always, I will see you again very soon.